Two paraplegics. One by the name of Kenneth Wright was a high school football star. He was an avid wrestler, boxer, hunter, skin diver. He broke his neck in a wrestling match, and it left him paralyzed from the chest down. The doctors were hopeful that one day he'd be able to walk with the help of braces and crutches. But this particular gentleman, Kenneth Wright, former athlete, could not reconcile himself with that physical disability. One day he prevailed on two of his friends to take him in a wheelchair to a wooded area. Unbelievably, they left him alone with a 12-gauge shotgun, where he took his life at 24 years old, a suicide victim. That's one. Second paraplegic, Jim McGowan, also about 50 years ago, just like Kenneth. At the age of 19, Jim was stabbed and left paralyzed from the chest down, confined to a wheelchair. He made the news when he did a successful parachute jump, landing on his target in the middle of a lake in the Poconos. Jim lives alone, cooks his own meals, washes his own clothes, cleans his house, drives himself in a specially equipped vehicle. And he's written 3 books, and then he did the photography for the first book on the history of wheelchair sports. 2 men, very similar handicaps. One chose life, the other did not. What's the difference? The difference, I suggest to you, is their response to opposition. Now, all of us face it. All of us face it. Some of you encountered opposition before you ever reached here today. Some of you are facing it right now, and you're having trouble concentrating on this message because you're thinking about that opposition. Some of us will leave here today feeling free and easy, only to encounter it before we even get home. So if we're paying attention to Scripture, we can expect it. Do you remember what Peter said in chapter 4, verse 12? Dear friends, he said, do not be surprised. Do not be shocked. Or how about the old version? Do not count it strange at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you as though something strange were happening. What is this? Opposition. I've never seen it before. I don't deserve it. Peter says, it's part of life. Now, the key is not what kind of opposition you're facing, although we're going to look at some of that, but the key is our response to it. Remember Zerubbabel's bunch? We're in Ezra, if you're a guest today. We're in the book of Ezra. In the Old Testament, we're about 3 or 4 chapters into it so far. And Zerubbabel led this group, 40 or 50,000, we've learned, out of Babylon, coming out of captivity, going back to their homeland after 70 years of captivity. And we learn that in Ezra, there are 3 different waves of return as they come back to the Babylon area. And the first group left around 535 BC. And what was their mission? To rebuild the temple. Let's get first things first. Let's get the worship of God right. In fact, we looked at that from the standpoint of revival. And they are going to rebuild the temple. And they're going to fulfill the promise that God made. God through Jeremiah. He said, you're going to come back. You're going to rebuild this temple that Nebuchadnezzar tore down. And this is the story, part of it, of that coming back and rebuilding. Ezra records it. And do you remember what we said the overall theme of the book of Ezra is? The unseen hand. Oh, it's everywhere throughout this book. And God moved. And God touched the heart of. And God took care of. Always this quiet behind the scenes, the unseen hand. Not always a big miracle in the sense of often our conventional definition of what a miracle is. No, just that hand of God. Remember the hand of God in provision, how he provided for them when they first left. We look at that. And then we look at the hand of God in revival. Well, now we're going to look at the hand of God when it comes to opposition. Opposition. And I'm not going to read everything yet, but we're going to be in chapters 4 and 5 and 6 as we look at the opposition that these people encountered. And here's what I want you to see. The enemy's opposition is no match for the Lord's omnipotence. Today we're going to look at the negative. We're going to look at the enemy's opposition. In the next message, when we get there finally, we'll look at the Lord's omnipotence. But today, there are many forms of the enemy's opposition. And you know, sometimes opposition is very open and plain to us. It's just blatant. We have no doubt that we are being opposed. For instance, when Churchill was a young man, he was asked to take to dinner a young lady that had political views that were in direct opposition to Churchill. Now, he was a young man. He was much slimmer, a debonair man about town, and he had just grown a mustache. As they were departing for dinner, the young lady said, "Mr. Churchill, I care neither for your politics nor your mustache." Now, Churchill, I just love his little quips that he came back with somehow so quickly. "Don't distress yourself," he replied. "You are not likely to come in contact with either." Well, sometimes opposition it's got the word written right on it. You can see it. It's wide open. But not always. For instance, here's one of the forms of opposition. That's what we're going to look at this morning, forms of the opposition. Here's one of the forms, accommodation. You say, what? Listen, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin, and remember, those are the two main tribes that went back, along with the Levites. When the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the exiles were building a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel, they, the enemies, came to Zerubbabel and said to the heads of the families, came to the Zerubbabel and to the heads of the families and said, "Let us help you. Let us help you build, because like you, we seek your God and have been sacrificing to him since the time of Esarhaddon, king of Syria, who brought us here." Accommodation. Let us accommodate you in your project. Sneaky, disguised opposition. After all, we worship the same God. Now, even if they did, in fact, worship the God of the Scriptures, the God of the Israelites, even if they did, they were polytheists. It was God and all the other gods. And they were so far from what a committed Hebrew would have been of that day. Be careful. Be careful, Christians, when the world wants to help you. With the causes of the Lord. They often have hidden agendas. So easily we can jump into bed with someone that we say, oh, I think they go to church. Oh, they said they worship the same God as I do. They may not. But remember this. The Lord doesn't need the world's help to accomplish what he wants to accomplish in you or in his church. He will supply. We already saw that. One of the forms of opposition, accommodation. Well, it didn't work. That third verse, I don't remember, I guess I didn't read it to you, but Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the rest of the heads of the families of Israel answered, you have no part with us in building a temple to our God. We alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, commanded us. Great answer. We don't need your help. Okay, then let's try something else. Verse 4, then the peoples around them set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. Now, folks, one of the things that happens when you're reading Scripture is a lot of time can pass between one verse and another, and it's not always described, the time frame. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But this first work could have gone on for quite a good while, and it wasn't getting done perhaps as quickly as they wanted it to. And when that happens, you're a target for discouragement. And Satan knows, oh how he knows, when you and I are the most vulnerable to discouragement. I have to tell you, I had all my eggs in one basket Friday. I wanted to be able to go home with everything done. I was not a happy camper. My fault, putting all my eggs in that basket, but that's what I did. And so, Satan knows when we're vulnerable. You've been working on a project for years, can't seem to get it off the ground. You're spending too much time away from the people you love, from family, from friends. You experience are you experiencing some discouragement? It's a form of opposition that the enemy uses. Never think that all of this encounter that you have is just you encountering yourself. Oh, this thought just came to me. Oh, I just can't seem to get past it. Hey, the opposition is alive and well. Well, I always want to say the opposition is alive and sick, but they're out there. And the opposition is looking always for a way into our lives. The world of evil, the world of Satan's dominion is always looking to accommodate, oh, that's sneaky, to discourage. Or, we already read it here in verse 4, they not only set out to discourage the people, but it also says, and make them afraid. There's a third form of opposition. What do you feel when you're approaching a place that you've never been? You're coming up on it alone, and suddenly a strange, angry dog appears, loose, and confronts you. I know what you fear. At least I know what I fear. I know what I fear. I know what I fear. That's the first response. It's built in. God made us with that fright or flight response, and we all know that. And it causes us to step back, right? Most of us are very susceptible to that. Some of us are downright, well, the psychologists call it neurotic. Yeah, that's all about fear. I like this little question and answer that I found. Question: what's the difference between a psychotic and a neurotic? Answer: a psychotic thinks that 2 and 2 equals 5. A neurotic knows that 2 and 2 are 4, but it really bothers him. Fear. Well, if that doesn't work, we just keep moving on here in this 4th chapter, and we see that the enemy, the opponent, can use frustration. And you thought that all was you. They bribed the officials to work against them, they being the enemies of the Jewish people. They bribed officials to work against them and frustrate, there it is, and frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, king of Persia, and down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. That's a pretty long period of time, because it didn't just go, quickly through those. There were years that passed as those individuals reigned. And so, frustration wells up. They bribed. The New American Standard Version says they hired. They put out good money to oppose. Zerubbabel gets a phone call. Hey, the Phoenicians can't get their ships through with the timbers that you ordered for the sanctuary. Apparently there's some kind of blockade that the enemies have put up out on the sea. The next thing he hears, well, Zerubbabel just came back from the county commissioner's office. County of Judah has held up our plans to build. Says there's some newly written safety code that we haven't complied with. Frustration. Frustration is real to me. I'm going to put it this way. Frustration can be a real source of sin for me when I get frustrated and do what I shouldn't or say what I shouldn't. More often it's probably saying what I shouldn't. One of my pet phrases that I'm just sure the opposition gave me that's been in my life for years. What are the odds? What are the odds of that? When you hear about something that took place and you think, there's so many other possibilities. Why did that one have to occur? The woman in Terre Haute, Indiana. You'll like this, Shirley. You've got some Terre Haute roots. A woman in Terre Haute, Indiana called the police to report a skunk in her cellar. Police said to her, well, make a trail of breadcrumbs. The trail of breadcrumbs from the basement out to the yard and wait for the skunk to follow it outside. A little bit later, she called back, very frustrated. I did what you told me, and now there are 2 skunks in my cellar. Frustration, right? And Satan's just saying, watch this. I think Satan is Murphy. You know Murphy's laws? Yeah. Nothing is as easy as it looks. Everything takes longer than you think. And if anything can go wrong, yeah, you know it. That's the cardinal law from Murphy. And it goes along with some of the others, like the other line always moves faster. Inside every large problem is a series of small problems struggling to get out. Frustration. I like this one. Whatever hits the fan will not be evenly distributed. Are you frustrated? Did it ever occur to you that the opposition may be behind it? That it's not just something you did wrong, or even that your best friend did wrong, or even that the doctor did wrong. A form of opposition. How about this one? Well, if that doesn't work, we can always use accusation. Next verse. We're just going down through these. Verse 6. At the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, so we got more time that's gone by, they lodged an accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. Who's they? The enemies that are surrounding them. So here we go. Accusation. By the way, like I told you, this is kind of out of chronological sequence, because we were in chronological sequence. We were just in the reign of Cyrus, and they were starting to build the temple and all that. But after a period of time, there was the second wave, and when that was led by Ezra and involved spiritual revival, and there was a third wave right after that Nehemiah brought in, and that was all about rebuilding the city. And actually, when the verse we just read took place during that third wave. But there was opposition to all of it. And the enemy was very involved. In fact, if you were to read it all, you'd see what they did was they wrote a letter first to Artaxerxes, and they played politics. They just schmoozed him. They said, do you know that those Jews are rebuilding that rebellious, wicked city? Not the temple now. Now we're up to the city. They're rebuilding that city. And do you know, Artaxerxes, that if that temple is built and that city is rebuilt, do you know that there will be no more taxes or tribute or duty that will be put into the royal coffers, and the revenues will suffer? Do you know that? And his response is in verse 16 here in chapter 4. Artaxerxes finally says this, or they say to him, we inform the king that if this city is built and its walls are restored, you will be left with nothing in Trans-Euphrates, the other side of the Euphrates. You'll end up with zip, nada, if you let that city be rebuilt. And Artaxerxes says, well, you know what, you're right. This is really going to get out of hand. And so in verse 23, as soon as the copy of the letter of Artaxerxes was read, because he sent a letter back to them, was read to Rehum and Shimshai the secretary and their associates, all the bad guys, they went immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. Built on what? Accusation. Accusation. In Zechariah, we're going to see something that's important here when it comes to accusation. Go back in time here. Go back now to where they're rebuilding the temple, all right? And listen to these words out of Zechariah. Zechariah was one of the prophets that was there on the scene when all this was taking place, okay? And he says this, in chapter 3, he writes this. Then he showed me, that is an angel that was showing him visions. He showed me Joshua, the high priest. That's the high priest that's there in Jerusalem during the rebuilding of the temple. He showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right side to what? There it is. Satan. The definition of Satan is the accuser. It's what he does day and night as much as possible. He's there accusing us before God. Oh, and what else is he besides an accuser? He's a liar. Jesus said he's the king or the father of all lies. So here he is accusing falsely, but you are aware, of course you are, that false accusations, if they get out into the world that we live in, false or not, they can be deadly. They can stop us and devastate us with any project. They can bring any great work of God to a halt, even though they aren't true. And so, when we finally finish 4 and get to 5, we actually have come back in time, and we're back where the temple is being rebuilt. And we read this in the first verse of chapter 5. Now Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the prophet, there he is. Zechariah and Haggai is the other one that's contemporary, a descendant of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of God of Israel who was over them. Then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, son of Jozadak, that's the high priest, set to work to rebuild the house of God. It had come to a stop because of the opposition. It had come to a stop. Now they're rebuilding, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. But guess who hadn't given up yet? Even then, the enemies. And we've got still one more form of opposition, and it is questioning authority. Verse 3, at that time, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shether, Bozenai, and their associates, again, these are the bad guys, went to them, to the Jews, and asked, who authorized you to rebuild this temple and to finish it? Who what? Who authorized you? They are questioning authority, and ultimately they are questioning the authority of God. Questioning authority. Give me I want your name. I want your badge number. Questioning authority. Oh, those two words still ring, don't they? In the halls of our schools and our courtrooms and our businesses and our government. The questioning of authority. The general rejection of any final authority, especially God. Maybe I can get them to question the very one that they are serving. We are facing the opponent, whether we recognize it or not. I've told you before about a guy named Norris. He's one of our favorite people. Big guy, football player. Was in our early ministry in San Jose. Been serving for years in an amazing global ministry now, but he lives up in Central Washington. He says this, he has a great family, big family, and he's very much a family man all the way. He said, I'm sitting in my truck with my 6-year-old granddaughter, Sawyer. You guys have a Sawyer in your family, yeah. She was struggling, he said, with her fear, especially of bees. And it had been keeping her awake at night, the fear. Said, and so he began to talk to her about it. And she said, in my mind, I see bees in my room and they're trying to get me. And her grandpa said, well, what do you think the bees think about? She said, well, I think they think about flowers and honey and stuff. And Nora said, sweetie, I think that's all they think about. Do you think they're ever really thinking about you, Sawyer? No, she said, I guess they don't have time because they're very busy making honey and stuff. You're right again, Nora said. Said, bees never think about us, and it's a lie to think that they're out to get us. So when you're trying to sleep and you think that the bees are trying to get you, are you afraid of something that's true or of something that's a lie? It was processing in her head, and she smiled and she said, it's a lie that bees want to get me. You're right again, sweet girl, he said. Do you remember what God says about fear? Well, she said, I learned from my mom and dad that God says we're not really to be afraid of anything. So, he said, instead of believing lies, I want you right now to ask God what he calls you. She actually closed her eyes and asked God to tell her, what do you call me? And then she opened them and she said, Grandpa, he calls me his mighty warrior and his song girl and his art girl, because I love to sing and do art. So when all those lies come back into your mind, Nora said, what are you going to do? I'm going to tell those lies to go away, because I'm a mighty warrior that doesn't have to be afraid of anything. Norris tells that story, and then he says, the enemy's always trying, but he's lying. He's always lying to us to cause us to believe lies about who we are. Very important there. About who we are. Here's a good question. What lie, what fear, what anxiety, what enemy is holding you hostage right now, today? And don't you know that the songwriter got it right when he said, fear is a liar. A liar. It's got all these forms. Fear is one of them. Accommodation, discouragement, frustration, accusation, questioning authority. We found those by just looking through this story, and there's so many more. And when you look at all that's out there, it's kind of frightening. Whoa! He's got quite an arsenal. And he does. But this is just the first part. The whole of this message is the enemy's opposition is no match for the Lord's omnipotence. And the next time we're back in this, we'll look at that side. But let's stop today and at least agree. Maybe it's not just in my head. Maybe it's coming from the outside. Opposition is real. And I need to trust him and let him be my shelter in the time of storm. Let's stand together. Let's stand. And let's proclaim. Don't just sing. Don't just rejoice. That's good. But kind of make a statement here today, okay? He's my, you're my, Christ is my, the Lord is my shelter in the time of storm. And if that means that there needs to be something public where you come and share that today, we're always open to that and willing to support and pray for you, okay? Let's sing it together.